So, Lent. One of the things to say about it just right away is that Lent and everything in the church year is based on the resurrection. It starts there. And so let's put the resurrection here and have glowing things out here. Okay, so everything is based on Lent. So whatever day the date of Easter is, we count back to get to Ash Wednesday. So we count back 5 Sundays or 6 Sundays, and then we go back to the Wednesday before that. The reason we do that is that the whole, as I said, the whole calendar is based on Lent, on Easter Day, but also in the early church, they began doing things like celebrating or observing what we would now call Good Friday and Holy Saturday. They did that as part of the training of new Christians. They would spend a long time, sometimes a year, sometimes 3 years, depending on how pagan the pagan people were that they were teaching. And by the end of the 400s, they had, or the beginning of the 400s, they had a process worked out so that if you were learning about Jesus in Jerusalem on what we now call Good Friday, they'd actually walk through Jerusalem to the places that are the Stations of the Cross now, and they're still there. They had put them, they had the steps for going to Pilate's house. They had the Roman palace. They had different places where, like Jesus fell, which is all traditional, that part. But they had 14 stations, and we have 8 of them that are biblical. By the time they were in the early 4th century, 5th century, the early 400s, pilgrims went there. And by that time, they had Palm Sunday added and Good Friday. So they had Holy Week that developed. And when they were working with the people who were learning, on Good Friday, they'd walk through Jerusalem. On Holy Saturday, Good Friday night, and all of Holy Saturday, they'd have like a review of all of salvation history, everything they'd been teaching them, from Genesis up through the stories about Jesus. Then at dawn on Easter Day, they would take them to water. And they would take them to water, and they would go down to the water wearing nothing. And they'd be either pushed under the water 3 times or have water poured over them 3 times. And a bishop was doing this. Then they'd come out of the water, and on the other side of the water, they'd be given brand new clothes, and they would be given, they'd have oil poured on their heads, and they'd be given bread and honey because they just entered the promised land. And then they would go to communion for the first time. And all of that, as churches developed, the regular training happened on Sunday mornings during the sermon and the Eucharist, and people would leave and go into the narthex. The narthex was big, and it was a place where they did teaching. I think that's connected to, how we used to be, those of us who grew up in the Episcopal Church when we were children, we were sent downstairs before the sermon and not allowed to come back up or stay in church until we were confirmed. But so the Lenten practices began in Jerusalem, and they began very soon after Jesus was crucified and resurrected, and then they developed. And then as things went on in Europe, we started observing 40 days of Lent because of the story that we read on the first Sunday in Lent, that Jesus spent 40 days and 40 nights in the wilderness. But then they added Ash Wednesday, which makes it longer than 40 days, but that's, partly symbolic. And by the time you get to the Middle Ages in Europe, Lent, that fasting and self-denial, Lent is a huge fast. In some parts of Europe, not only no meat or fat, and which was the stuff we get rid of with pancake suppers, but also no dairy, no eggs. I don't know what the hens did for the 40 days of Lent, because they would have been still laying eggs, but maybe not in the winter as much. Anyway, people ate practically nothing. They had bread, they had water, and that was part of their fast. Then by a Holy Week in Jerusalem, and then eventually, that whole Palm Sunday event would happen. People would wave palms or just branches or whatever they had. And then on Good Friday, they would be fasting all day and all night. And then on Easter Day, they would break their fast, and they could have dairy, and they could have meat, and they could have all of those things. If you look at traditions in the Slavic countries like Ukraine and Russia, Liz, you could talk about Ukrainian eggs for a minute if you want.
Well, according to tradition, people start decorating these eggs starting on Ash Wednesday, and they do it the whole 6 weeks, which is why they're so ungodly beautiful.
Incredible eggs.
The talented people ones are. And then on Easter, they go around and give them to their friends.
And those eggs are just amazing. Liz used to help us with actually doing some Ukrainian eggs. But there's a wax, what's that called? Wax transfer, wax something.
Yeah, it's kind of an additive. You add wax where you want to keep the color, and then you get totally covered with do successive dyeing and stuff, and then you put it in the oven and wipe it all off, and then they're gorgeous.
And the reason they started it on Ash Wednesday was that it was essentially a Lenten discipline of creating something in preparation for Easter. Also in those countries, there's Easter bread, and there's usually a red egg inside the Easter bread. All of those things are symbolic of being, being in tune and then breaking it open and seeing all that. In terms of other traditions, what I remember growing up is that we had mite boxes, and they give them out in church or in Sunday school, and they were purple boxes that you put together with, and they were cardstock, and every day you put the widow's mite. You put a little bit, a penny or a dime. I mean, if you were a little kid, those are what you had anyway. And if you found something like that, you put it in the mite box. And then on Easter Day, we bring our mite boxes. Here, they used to put them in a cross and that was not happening when I got here. I don't know when they stopped doing that. But it was our offering, our Easter offering from our Lenten discipline of putting something in that mite box every day. There were also, we and my family did give up meat on Fridays. A couple of years, probably the very best year I had as a teenager, with my sister a teenager, and our stepmother and our baby sister and my father. My sister and I did not get along with our stepmother very well. In fact, I didn't. I created havoc for that family that has only recently been. Anyway, the best Lent we had, and one of the best times we had, was planning meals for all the days of Lent without meat. And I cooked things, and my sister cooked things, and my stepmother cooked things. And we made this whole plan. And it was a challenge, but it was actually also, it created peace in our household that we hadn't had. So it was an interesting kind of a thing. And that taught me, and I think my sister, probably my stepmother, that, collectively denying ourselves of something and planning to do it left us open for a better relationship, because we weren't fighting about everything. So what are some traditions that you have had in your households in Lent? And then we'll get Michael to tell us, and then I'll show you some of this other stuff. Jim, what did you do in Lent in your house?
Well, very little meat and mostly vegetable diet during.
Okay, I'm gonna hop over you, Michael, and go to you, Esther. Did you observe Lent?
Well, I grew up Presbyterian, and there really wasn't a lot of ritual. And, of course, we went to church and Sunday school every Sunday. Sunday schools for sure every Sunday. And I remember feeling it all, but I can't remember doing anything actually. Isn't that awful? Maybe that's why I was riveted to the Catholic Church, because there was so much more ritual, and
More of the outward and visible signs.
right, so no, we really didn't do anything.
How about you, Harlan? You grew up Catholic, right?
A lot of fish.
A lot of fish.
Tuna casserole was every Fridays.
That was something we did. And we when we were still living in California, we were with our mother every other weekend, and she always had a tuna casserole for us on Friday. I loved her tuna casserole. Liz, you grew up Catholic and Episcopalian.
Yeah, well, obviously no meat on Friday, but it was really nice, public communion, because at 6 o'clock we had a service every Thursday. We were basically a third of the choir, since there were 5 of us. And we sang at that service. We had a big meal prepared by the ladies of the church, and then we went to choir practice. But we did that every single Thursday during Lent.
Wow,
And
that
then, of
sounds
course,
really
we
neat.
also sang at the noon service on Good Friday and Easter Sunday.
Oh, wow. How about you, Gary?
Well, Gail and I usually find some type of a book of meditations that we'll read and talk about. And when we do the vigil and keep the church open all night.
On Thursday night.
On Thursday night, I usually volunteer for the 9 or 10 o'clock, which means that the midnight people don't show up, which means I'm there until about 9 the next morning.
Sorry about that.
And of course, we, in addition to Lent, when we were overseas, we had the Ramadan fast, where once the sun came up, you neither ate nor drank. You couldn't get any liquids or from
Talk about power of suggestion.
yeah.
Wow.
As soon as the sun came, when we were in Alexandria, as soon as the sun came up in the morning, they fired the anti-aircraft guns out over the harbor to let people know that you had
Wow.
that was all public water fountains and everything were turned off. Restaurants were all closed. And then once it finally got dark enough, they would fire them again, and you were then allowed to eat
Wow.
at night.
And so sometimes people stayed up really late at night and party, and not during
Oh,
the
yes.
party, but, well, yeah. Party.
Oh, yes, they did. We had a carnival right outside our apartment building that started at about midnight and ran until about 5 in the morning.
Wow. Well, see, then if you go to bed, even though the guns are firing at sunrise, you don't have to worry about not eating for a while because you're asleep.
You're asleep.
But they don't sleep, they eat all night.
They eat
all-
Till
yeah.
6 in the morning.
And then they.
Then the whole day will be like, dozing all the time. We are full of food.
So Tanzania practices in Lent.
My background is a high church.
Mhm,
It's almost Catholic.
mhm.
And then when I grew up in the evangelical, they call it evangelical low church.
Okay.
There's high church and low church.
Mhm.
I was born in high church. When I was still in a teenage age, I moved to the low church. And in high church, there's a lot of restrictions, just like the Catholics. You don't eat meat on Friday, no music, no any kind of luxuries.
Ooh,
You
no
can-
music even?
No music, no.
Wow.
Yeah, if you turn off radio, it's only for news. Then after news, you turn off the radio.
Wow.
There's nothing, no wedding, nothing, even the music in the street, people who come to our church, if they do that, someone will report them to the priest. Someone is doing this and this and this. So,
Wow.
so no music, and Friday, no meat. And even sometimes you don't have to wear luxury clothes. You just wear ordinary kind of stuff.
Okay, so you don't dress up at all?
No, no,
Okay.
no. And also every Friday, you have to go to church.
Friday and Sunday then?
Yeah, every Friday for fasting.
Amen.
And some people fast on the Friday,
Mhm.
and we just go to church on Friday, and then we go to Sundays regularly. But also, you avoid not going to public pub.
Okay, so you don't go out and kind of have a
No, to have fun or
community
no,
time of fun.
it is fasting time, and some people be monitoring you, and if they see you behaving against the Lent, they will report you.
Wow.
And so when I moved to the low church, there's not much restriction, but the focus was always change of heart.
Mhm.
That whatever we do, we'll have service every Friday, but we'll be focusing on how we can help the needy. It's a time to give something to the orphanage, the widows, to elderly people, to whoever has special need, visiting people in hospitals with gifts, all this Lenten time, and to make sure as a family you prepare special offer for anyone. If you want to go to church, if the church has a project, maybe you want to do something, you make sure you get something to offer for the church project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I grew up in a very ethnic community. I mean, Italian, Polish, Eastern European, very ethnic. And I remember envying my Catholic friends for all the things, all the rules and the rituals and it was, I guess, different denominations.
Oh, I forget something.
Observer,
I
I'm
forget
sorry.
something.
I didn't mean, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I
That was
forget
all.
something is about you eat a special vegetable which is bitter.
What is it like?
I've not seen it here, but
It's a bitter vegetable?
yeah, you boil it with meat.
See all that.
Okay,
Yeah, so
like,
it's very bitter, but just to remind you, it can only be eaten when it is tender.
Right.
When it matures, it becomes very bitter. No one is, only goats can eat it.
on a regular basis, except during Lenten, you cook it with your meat.
Yeah,
Wow.
especially the first day, the Ash Wednesday or Friday. You decide just to remind your family how bitter was slavery.
Mhm.
It was like, trying to copy the Jewish tradition.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So
The
that,
bitter herbs.
yeah,
Wow.
very
Yeah.
bitter herbs. So why do you do this? No, you forget. We have to remind you.
It's good, it's good. Good for children, I think.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So you were saying you envied the Catholic just because they had all these rules that
Right,
set them apart and the season of Lent or whatever other season apart.
sure. I
Yeah,
did.
but it was also a challenge to us evangelicals, the low church, because they always focus on inner change, which no one can see it. But we
Right.
wanted them to do what they say they believe. We wanted them to see what they say they've changed. We wanted them to see it. And it was so difficult. It's easier for someone to have an excuse, I do it in my heart. No, we want to see it. So it was a challenge. They say, we do it in our heart. We believe in our heart. We don't have to show. And it was even, we were saying a lot of hypocrisy. If you show you are fasting, also it's a problem. You don't have to tell anybody that you are fasting. But for me, I would say, no, say it. because fasting is fasting. Just let us know that you are fasting. Don't just deny a drink. When you offer you a drink, you say, no, not for today. No, no. Just say you are fasting, because you should not be ashamed of your action during Lent. But since we read from the gospel that don't show,
Right,
you know,
right, don't just figure your face, yeah, that's that's why I always talk about that on Ash Wednesday, because,
yeah,
you know,
Exactly what we do.
right, exactly what we do, and we have a reason for doing it.
yeah,
But, and it's not to show off,
yeah,
but,
yeah.
we tend to think it might be. Okay. Symbols of Lent. Symbols of Lent are different kinds of crosses that we see. The color, the official name for this is violet, but I always think of violet as lighter, so I call this purple.
Yeah.
And if you look around in the church, you see symbols that are connected to, you see the color. We have to figure out how to put the icons back up, because we've got all of the nails out of the wall, but there's got to be a way to do it. So we haven't figured that out yet. And then our stoles tell stories. And so you see in here just different colors of purple and pink. This is a stole from Central America. And if you look at it, you can see that here's Calvary Cross. And here's a dove coming down at Easter. Here's bread in a basket. Here are fish in the water. Here's a cross and Jesus's arms reaching out. So stoles, vestments that we wear in church, in addition to being pretty, have meaning. This one was made for me, well, actually, so was the woven one, made for me when I was in Columbia. Bob had a member of the parish who was a weaver do this. And then right before I came here, at the beginning of Holy Week, the person brought this stole, and it's actually an Advent stole because it says in this season of anticipation, remember. But she gave it to me at the beginning of Lent, so I always connect it with both of those. And it's got a Jerusalem cross, and it's got a vine climbing. And the person who made it, I never figured out how she ever had the time, because she had 2 teenagers and 2 toddlers, and she was an attorney for the state of Missouri. I had no idea. She had to just stay up late at night to do that. This stole, you can see colors again for that we would use in Lent and Advent, and you can see the purple, but you can also see the promise, the green. This stole belonged to my friend who died, who was my roommate in seminary, and her family, her sisters sent me her stoles. This one also, it can be used in Lent, and it can be, but you've got the color, the hope colors in there. This one, this is from Israel. It's got a Jerusalem cross. It has a camel in the desert and another Jerusalem cross. And it's just, it's symbols. Oh, okay.
What's the difference between Jerusalem cross and other crosses?
The Jerusalem cross is square like this.
Why
It
is
has
it,
4.
why is it square?
I don't know. Do you know?
I don't, because since last week I'm kind of, for the first time I'm struggling the way we celebrate the cross. I don't know why. I like, you know, this thing's not good. Why do we celebrate it? It's killing someone.
Yes. it killed someone, and the transformation
Yeah.
for us. I mean, this is a Jerusalem cross without the little crosses in the middle, but anytime you have a square cross, or this is also a Greek cross, really.
Okay.
And it's square, but without those little crosses in there. This is
The Roman.
yes, this is a Roman cross. Where is it? This is St. Andrew's cross. I also think of it as connected to St. Peter, because he was crucified upside down. And to do that, you have to be in the form of an X. This is an anchor cross. And it's a reminder that Christ is our anchor. What's this called? This is a budded cross, because it looks like a tree bud. We also call it a Roman cross. Let's see here, they're bigger pictures, but I'm looking for. We know this one, Celtic cross. And you see these in Ireland and Scotland in different places, old stone crosses. And the Tau cross, which I seem to have dropped here somewhere. Okay, this is sorry. The Tau cross, that's this one. And it resembles the Greek letter Tau, T. The Egyptians and others used this ancient symbol before the time of Christ. It's also called the Old Testament cross because according to tradition, the pole on which Moses lifted the brazen serpent looked like that. And the serpent had to hold on somehow.
Okay.
So, these are from the Godly Play materials, and what they have is hands-on, you can touch these things, and then they have cards you can match. So there's a lot of learning in those things. There's one more, I just have to find it. Who knows what this is? I can't find the card, and I did know what this was.
It's an ankh.
It's an
Ankh.
It's an
And
Ankh
that's-
Egyptian.
It's an Ankan Egyptian, and it's a
Symbol
cross.
for eternal life.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Those are Lenten symbols that we use.
The Coptics still use that.
What'd you say?
The Coptics.
The
still
Coptic
use
Church,
that.
thank you. That's the
Coptic
church I was
Church
trying to
uses it.
remember. The Coptic Church. And let me get this right. Okay, these are actually Godly Play, sort of Stations of the Cross, but what they use these for is to tell the story of Jesus during the season of Lent. So this is his baptism. You can see John there. And then this is his teaching. This is his dealing with little children. This is his breaking bread on the mountain. This is the bread and wine at the Last Supper. This is part of his journey through Jerusalem, but this is actually at the foot of the cross, Jesus saying to Mary and to John, you know, woman, behold your son, son, behold your mother. And then this one is the crucifixion. And then what they do on Easter Day is they turn this over. And they have the, right.
Where, who did those and where did you get those, Tamsen?
These are part of what was is a educational, I don't call it a program, but it's a
Curriculum.
it's a curriculum, it's a hands-on, it's a Montessori-based program for Sunday school called Godly Play. And it's based on the assumption that every child already has a relationship with God, whether they're tiny or older. And it's our job as the church to give them the vocabulary to talk about that relationship, to help them deepen it, and also to give them the stories that are surrounding and holding it up. So there's one on the church year, there's one on baptism. And in theory, when we have a functioning Sunday school, every time we have a baptism, they bring out the baptism one in Sunday school. Otherwise, they bring it out on the baptism of Jesus on the first Sunday after the Epiphany. They have a bunch of Old Testament stories. And the idea is that play for children is their work, because that's how they learn things.
Mhm.
And that, you know, if you've got, it helps to have touch, taste, smell. When they do the baptism thing, they have candles, real candles. They have the chrism that the bishop blesses, and that's scented oil, and it's in there, and they can smell it. So it's touch, taste, smell, and then the idea is also that they share the stories, kind of like what we're doing now in talking to each other about how we observe Lent. We pass that on. We did it with our children. Did anybody have any children rebel when you were practicing Lent and stuff in your house?
I got all that in my church too, you know, in the Presbyterian church.
Mm-hmm.
Everything you're saying in Sunday school growing up. I don't remember anybody rebelling. Do people do, I guess, I don't know. Do kids rebel? I know kids.
Does the sun rise in the morning?
I know. God knows I've had 3 of them, but I don't know. I don't ever.
Actually, I'm thinking that sometimes when you do stuff as a family, like I described that whole thing of, really focusing on keeping a fast as a family. I think sometimes when you do stuff as a family, it makes a difference. And there's less rebellion because this is just what we do.
Right.
Now, there's some rebellion is, okay, we're going to Sunday school. There was rebellion in that in my family, and there was no option. We went to Sunday school. That was just it. But as far as some of the family rituals that you do, I think it really helps bind a family in a way that, kind of sets aside the rebellion piece for a little bit. One of the people who came up with Godly Play, John Westerhoff, has been here in this diocese more than once. And he was here for a clergy retreat one time, and he was talking about how they always, during Advent, after dinner, they would light Advent candles, and they'd have a kid read and another kid do something else, and they would have an Advent thing every night. And of course, it would be, the first week of Advent, it would be 1 candle and 2 candles. And they started fussing about, how they always had to do this, and round, dinner was over, and they wanted to go, do whatever. So he says they all go off to college. They come back at Christmas. Well, why aren't we doing the Advent thing? He said he was fighting with them for the 4 or 5 years before they went off to college.
Well, I guess if you don't do any of that stuff in the family, there's nothing to rebel against, huh?
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah,
But how can, I don't want to express or share how Lent is helpful to become who you are today. Do you see any Lent doing something in your personal relationship with God, or just a routine? It's during Lent now, and after Lent we go back to our. I remember the other day was an argument of the lady saying, "No, yes, people are fasting, but we cannot see the decrease of the liquor sale in the store. We see people are still drinking, but we don't see them, but we can see the sale is still going high. What's happening?"
Well, I guess me, it just sunk in. It just sunk in somehow. I can't. All of it.
Because if you read the book of Isaiah, there's a lot of this with God and the Israelites. This is not the first I say. This is not what I wanted. I don't like this. I don't like this. I want you to see the change in your heart. I want you to see how you support the needy. I want you to see doing that. So sometimes Lent helps us to become the better person. We don't tell, but at least we know ourselves that during this time I have improved my face. I'm now able to do this which I was not able to do before. Because after all this time, I know for sure something you have it, in your life,
Sure.
which has improved.
It's an outward sign that you're.
We don't have that tradition of sharing.
We're sharing it as part of a community.
Yeah.
And I think in many ways, the Western church, most people don't go on pilgrimages anymore, where you walk 25 or 30 miles to go to a church and stop and pray along the way.
Well, and
To
that's,
show that you're
in
part of
Europe,
it.
they did that for centuries.
For
That's where you get
centuries.
the Canterbury Tales, actually, with all the really bizarre people in that group.
But it was
And
a
that's
way of-
also where we know about some of the stuff in Jerusalem that happened during Holy Week, because there was a female pilgrim from somewhere in Europe named Egeria, and she wrote about it. She wrote about, this is what we did on this day, and we walked here and we did that. And this is where we were at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. This is where we were, and it's really not a travel log, it's a meditation, but it's fascinating.
It's a way of outwardly showing that you're part of a
'Cause you're moving.
community.
Right, well, and that's one
You're
reason that we put the Stations of the Cross up. That's one reason we have a labyrinth. And that's one reason that we drag ourselves down the driveway on Palm Sunday.
So I can remember some years ago now, Jane and I were driving north of the west side of Spain. And 3 times as we went along, we came across pilgrimage routes. They were going into Spain, and there were dozens and dozens of people walking along the path. We crossed it. They were going on to
Yeah, I think that's called the Camino, it's called and it goes through the Pyrenees, it goes through the plains, it goes, Maria Evans has been on that pilgrimage.
not something you see around here much.
No, unfortunately, it is. There are a few designated, I think, pilgrimage sites. Indiana.
Yeah.
They have some churches that are.
There's also the Boy Scouts last Good Friday, yes. Last Good Friday, a group of the Scouts, a few people from here and then from a bunch of troops around here. Actually, it must have been Palm Sunday. They went on a walk they were gonna go to, I don't remember how many churches. They ended up going to 10. And they came here to our labyrinth, and they wanted me to give a meditation on 2 of the different Stations of the Cross. And they wanted to go to 14, but they came to 10. And it was really kind of neat. We all stood around in the labyrinth and talked, and they walked the labyrinth. They didn't have as much time as they wanted. It had taken them longer, but it was a bunch of Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts and their families, and it was kind of neat. It was one of the Catholic troops, one of the troops sponsored by the Catholic Church who organized it.
You just reminded me, last week I went to the library and two of the three seats been pulled down.
I'm sorry, you went where, to the labyrinth?
Yeah,
The seats are pulled down?
yeah, two of them.
Are they broken or just apart?
I think apart in some edges of these stones kind of, I don't know, crushed, but only one is there.
Really?
Yeah,
That has been there for, I don't know, 20 years and nobody's bothered it ever. Okay, that's, we need to pay attention to that.
yeah.
Rats. And that's, you know, Betty's comment in her sermon that the temptation to be destructive, the temptation to fight against, I want to say holiness or sacredness is there. It's out there. It's in us too.
Even he said, this is my demon.
Yeah, she held that up. This is my demon. Okay, we can, I was going to have just one prayer. Oh, excuse me. As the forums go on, next week we'll be talking about saints, and we'll look at Absalom Jones, and we'll look at my brain's just stopped. But we'll look at several saints, both we'll look at anyway, and we'll have 4 saints next Sunday, and Absalom Jones will be one of them. 2 of them will be ancient, and 2 of them will be more modern. And then we're going to have Betty on the 12th of March is going to do a presentation on her trip to Jerusalem. So that will be the forum on the 12th. And then Michael is going to talk about the church in Tanzania. And he's going to do that on the 19th and the 26th. And then the third one will be after Easter, because we won't have the forum on either Palm Sunday, the 2nd, or Easter Day, the 9th. So the 16th of April will be the third one of those. Jim is going to do something. So we're gonna have, it's happening. All right, one prayer and we're gone here. I'm gonna do the prayer for, that's part of the Ash Wednesday service that Betty quoted part of it in her sermon today. So some of you will hear it. Sorry. I don't know how to find these things. Actually, what I'm going to do instead is a collect that we read on Good Friday and at ordinations and on other days, and it is about the change of heart. O God of unchangeable power and eternal light, look favorably on your whole church, that wonderful and sacred mystery. By the effectual working of your providence, carry out in tranquility the plan of salvation. Let the whole world see and know that things which were cast down are being raised up, and things which had grown old are being made new, and that all things are being brought to their perfection by him, through whom all things were made. Your Son, Jesus Christ our Lord, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you all very much. Great.